Naming new cardinals, Pope Francis will elevate clergy as a busy new year begins for the Holy Father. Bipartisan support, joining forces for a law to help parents of children with Down syndrome and other disabilities. Balancing immigration, how the Catholic Church provides help to immigrants while upholding the law. And keeping Christ in Christmas, a live nativity scene at the nation's highest court. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, December the 11th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. In a rare bipartisan move, Congress is expected to approve legislation giving Americans with disabilities more financial independence. Chief White House correspondent Susanne LaFrankie has the story.
Brian, 85% of Congress supports the ABLE Act, including the most conservative to the most liberal of its members. ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. It is the biggest piece of legislation to affect disabled Americans in 25 years. Its supporters say it will impact some 54 million lives.
You can't do something this significant without broad bipartisan support.
Divisiveness and partisanship gave way to compromise and cooperation as Republicans and Democrats from both chambers push for Senate passage of the ABLE Act.
We have a chance to help people that really need help, and what we're doing is we're really helping them help themselves. And it seems to me that that is a prototype of how we ought to do more things in Washington.
The Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, passed by the House last week, creates new tax-exempt investment accounts for people like Sarah Wolf.
It feels really great to have this piece of legislation to help with certain things like medical assistance or transportation, save money for the future.
ABLE accounts would supplement coverage already provided to disabled Americans under assistance programs, which now have financial limits.
In order to qualify for benefits, you can only have $2,000 in assets at any given time. So this is basically forced poverty for our constituents.
Many of the bill's sponsors shared personal stories. Representative Pete Sessions has a 20-year-old son born with Down syndrome, and like others who care for those with challenges, worries about his son's future.
Alex will go from 20 to 30 to 40, and we need to make sure we can take care of not just Alex as our family responsibility, but others can also.
Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey told me that the Senate will vote on this bill before the Congress adjourns, and it has the full backing of the president. From the White House, Susanne LaFrankie, EWTN News Nightly.
Now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. An unlikely alliance, the Obama White House joining forces with Republicans tonight, urging Democrats to approve a $1 trillion spending bill to keep the government running through next year. The bill includes $521 billion for defense, almost $500 billion for non-defense spending. Federal funding for most abortions is withheld, the exception being cases involving rape, incest, and the life of the mother. HHS is ordered to inform consumers if programs on the federal exchange cover abortion services. The Affordable Care Act remains funded, but without additional money. Campaign finance limits are being raised about tenfold. Common Core educational standards are not funded. And Ebola prevention gets about $5.4 billion. The director of the CIA defending his agency in the wake of this week's release of a critical Senate report on interrogation tactics. Wyatt Goolsby is here with that story tonight.
Brian, today CIA Director John Brennan did say that his agency was out of bounds in how it treated suspected terrorists after the 9/11 attacks, saying the tactics they used were abhorrent, but he also came just short of calling it torture.
In many respects, the program was uncharted territory for the CIA, and we were not prepared.
In a rare press conference, CIA Director John Brennan admitted aspects of the report released by the Senate were accurate in its description of the U.S. treatment of detainees in hidden prisons overseas. The summary says while Brennan was the CIA Deputy Director under Bush, some prisoners were chained to walls, sleep-deprived, and in some cases waterboarded. Since then, Brennan says the agency has changed its protocol.
It is vitally important to recognize, however, that the overwhelming majority of officers involved in the program at CIA carried out their responsibilities faithfully and in accordance with the legal and policy guidance they were provided.
But not everyone thinks the CIA or the administration has gone far enough. Some in Congress, like Senator Mark Udall, say the White House should let Brennan go. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest says that's not necessary.
The president continues to rely on his advice to this day.
The administration may be watching its words, but some Catholics are speaking out more clearly. Dr. Stephen Kalecki with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says the tactics described in the report are torture by a moral definition, but he says the U.S. is taking a step in the right direction.
The United States, by shining the light of day on this, I think, will actually be able to regain its moral standing in the world, and other countries will be more willing to work with us on counterterrorism efforts because we will have a clean record, as it were, a new beginning. This is not about...
A couple NATO allies today also condemned the harsh treatment of detainees, but praised the decision to make the report public. One foreign minister hopes the report will serve as motivation for the U.S. not to let it happen again. Brian?
Thank you, Wyatt Goolsby. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee votes today to authorize the president's fight against the Islamic State. The Obama administration is relying on post-9/11 authorization to carry out the attacks on ISIS. Today's vote, 10-8. Democrats voting in favor and Republicans opposed. The committee chair says he will seek a full Senate vote before Congress adjourns. However, that vote is likely to be delayed until next year. Pope Francis plans to create new cardinals in February. The consistory will be the Holy Father's second, having named 19 new cardinals this past February. February 2015 will be a busy month for the Pope and the church hierarchy. The Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors meets, continuing its mission to prevent abuse and provide care for victims. Then the Council of Cardinals for the Reform of the Roman Curia will gather in Rome. Also, the College of Cardinals will meet to discuss reform and reorganization in the Holy See, including the streamlining of Vatican offices. Police are pulling down tents and hauling off the last protesters from a Hong Kong protest site. For nearly 3 months now, pro-democracy protesters filled the streets, challenging China's control over local Hong Kong elections. The Chinese government continues to reject the protesters' demand for open elections. Hong Kong's Catholic Cardinal John Tong has been urging peaceful solutions from both sides. He says, quote, "As Christians, we believe that with God as its creator, our world can always offer hope." Well, a Christmas sign of hope appears on Capitol Hill today. Wise men, shepherds, the Holy Family, even a camel, stopped outside the U.S. Supreme Court building. This live nativity scene, organized by Faith in Action in the nation's capital, processed through Capitol Hill. Scripture was read as actors volunteered their time on this cold December day. Unlike the rest of the volunteers, the camel accepted no payment for his labor of love. Well, this is the vigil of the celebration of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and joining us from the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, Rodolfo Bermejo, a journalist born and raised near that apparition site. Rodolfo, there are thousands of pilgrims streaming into that basilica right now. What's going on there?
That's right, Brian. There are thousands of people walking into the Basilica of Guadalupe. Tonight, they will come here to sing to Our Lady Happy Birthday, that we call in Mexico Las Mañanitas. This is a tradition that's been going on for several years, since 1531, when Juan Diego had the apparition on the 9th of December, and Our Lady appeared to him, who was an Indian from the Aztec or the Nahuatl customs. She spoke to him in his language, and she mentioned a message: "I am your mother, and I'm here to look after you." She asked him to build a basilica, which is the one we have here on the back. That basilica is from the 16th century. Today, the new basilica was built in 1980, and that is right on the left side of mine. That new basilica holds tonight more than 1 million people. Outside the basilica, there are more than 4 million people coming in the last few days, and 22 million people came on the last year.
Rodolfo, Rodolfo, of course, Our Lady of Guadalupe is the patroness of the Americas, but there is a special connection for the people of Mexico. Can you explain to our viewers, who, by the way, celebrate Our Lady of Guadalupe very specially, what Our Lady means to the Mexican people?
Can't hear anything.
Apparently, we've lost our connection with Rodolfo. Are you able to hear us now, Rodolfo? Well, we certainly got a sense of what it's like there in Mexico City, and we appreciate Rodolfo Romero joining us from the site of the Basilica there, where thousands are already streaming in. He said about 1 million people will celebrate the vigil tonight, and they will celebrate an entire day throughout tomorrow, the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, who is also the patron of EWTN. Coming up, an attorney for Catholic Charities explains services offered to immigrants. And we dissect the newest numbers on abortion from the CDC. Today, Pope Francis tweets, "Ecology is essential for the survival of mankind. It is a moral issue which affects all of us." The Holy Father is encouraging those involved in a climate conference in Peru. He says climate change is a serious ethical and moral responsibility. Thanks for joining us. On this Thursday evening, I'm Brian Patrick. Half of Americans believe Republicans will block President Obama's executive order on immigration, this according to a new poll. The order has yet to take effect, but Catholic groups are already helping some of those who would be protected from deportation. Jason Calvi explains.
Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Washington is standing by, ready to help people navigate through the many questions that are coming through Obama's executive order. Immigrants are coming to these very doors. Here in this archdiocese, there's about 10 immigration lawyers who will be answering a lot of the questions, including Michelle Mendez. Michelle, what are you doing right now?
Yeah, that's right, Jason. We are preparing the community for what is supposed to be rolled out in mid-May. The administration has asked for 180 days to roll out the program, and that was since the date of the announcement on November 20th. So we're trying to get the right information out, in particular telling the community there's nothing to apply for right now. But while we are waiting, you can gather your documentation, because they'll have to prove that they have had residence in the United States since January 1st, 2010, that they have a family relationship that is a child who is a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident, and then to also be aware of unlawful practitioners of immigration law.
Are there scammers out there, really?
There are a lot of scammers out there in this field. We see them every single time that there's an announcement, even just a rumor of potential immigration relief coming. And these are people who take advantage of the community, prey upon the community and say, I'm an attorney, and ultimately they botch the cases of so many in the community, they take their money, and the community is left with nothing when they get involved with unauthorized practitioners of law. So that's why we're trying to make our name known and telling people where they should go for appropriate, adequate, competent legal assistance.
And at Catholic Charities, what are you hearing from the people that you are meeting with already right now?
People are really excited in general. They have a lot of questions still, which is normal, but they're very excited in particular because they long for the prospect of not being fearful, of not having that day-to-day paranoia that they might be separated from their family by immigration and customs enforcement. And so they're very excited, and they just want to know, what can I do to make this work? But ultimately they're excited, and we have seen over the years a lot of people who will be able to benefit.
Wow, well, thank you very much for your time today, Michelle. I appreciate it. Reporting here at Catholic Charities, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Jason. The Centers for Disease Control reports national abortion rates are at their lowest since 1973, when the Supreme Court ruled on Roe v. Wade. A total of 730,322 abortions were reported to the CDC in 2011. That's the most recent reporting year that we have. That's a rate of 13.9 abortions per 1,000 women ages 15 through 44. The rate is down 5% from 2010. Now, between 2002 and 2011, the abortion rate fell by 14%, with 2011 producing the lowest levels of that period. It's good to have Sarah Torre back with us, a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation's DeVos Center for Religion and Public Policy. Is there a connection between fewer abortions and a greater acceptance of unwed parenting?
Sure. So there's a whole host of factors that go into both these, the reduction in the abortion rate and also the increase in unwed childbearing. Look, over the past 40 years, and these numbers are something to cheer, the past 40 years, the pro-life movement has seen incredible victories in culture, making the case for life, the humanity of the unborn. In law, we've seen a record number of laws at the state level protecting life, protecting the lives of women. And also just in the physical support to unwed and to women facing unplanned pregnancies through 2,000 abortion to pregnancy centers across the country that are providing physical, emotional support to women who are facing really difficult challenges. So it's not ironic that more women with all of these support systems are choosing life for their children.
Well, it's good to know some progress is being made, and while certainly a father and a mother in a family raising their children is an ideal, a live baby is certainly far better than an abortion.
Absolutely.
Can the pro-life movement do better making, or I guess convincing fathers to be more a part of this, to be more responsible?
You know, I think we've done a really good job of making the case for life, but we haven't always done a good job of making the case for marriage. But that doesn't mean we've given up on the institution, right? We can take the lessons that we've learned, the victories of the pro-life movement, and apply those to rebuilding a marriage culture. Look, you've got welfare penalties in the welfare system that penalize marriage. You have a sexual revolution that decoupled sex from marriage. Many low-income women don't even see marriage as a necessity before having a child. They think having a child is just another step on the road to marriage. So we have a lot of education to do with many young men and women in America on the benefits of marriage, not only to themselves, but to their children.
You mentioned low-income women. Is there a difference between how low-income women and women of a higher income view this idea of getting married first before having children?
There certainly is, and I think for many of those reasons that I just mentioned, you've got a lot of different factors coming at especially low-income women, where they have grown up in a culture and they haven't been told often or seen the benefits of marriage to themselves, to their children. Many don't know, many Americans generally don't know that if a child is born inside of an intact married family, that child is 80% less likely to experience childhood poverty than someone who's raised in a single-parent household. These are the things we should be telling to all Americans from the time they're young, teenagers, young adults, just the way we've done with, you know, anti-smoking campaigns or staying in school. We should be telling them all of the benefits that this incredible life choice is going to make for you and your future children.
A huge difference. So while these numbers appear to be encouraging, should we be a little bit cautious about them? Is there really an accurate way to record these statistics?
Yeah, so whenever you're looking at abortion data, there's certainly some caveats. Much of this data is voluntarily reported. Some of the data from the CDC doesn't even include whole states. So despite even those caveats that we need to consider, whichever study you're looking at, the abortion rate has definitely declined. That's something to cheer, and we need to continue the good work that we've done in both culture and law and the pro-life movement to continue making the case for life and continue supporting mothers who find themselves with unplanned pregnancies.
Are you encouraged by this, and what do you think is the next step to making this trend something that will eventually do away with abortion?
Sure. So I think we continue to make, you know, those arguments in both culture and law. You see a number of states taking up even more aggressive stances to put the dignity of both and the lives of both the mother and the child back into policy. Those are great advances. The advances in the pregnancy center movement have been tremendous. You know, the ability to show a woman an ultrasound picture of her unborn child is one of the best arguments that we have. So continuing all of those efforts and applying those same lessons to, again, the marriage issue. We can have both not only an argument for the culture of life, but also an argument for the culture of marriage.
Yeah,
and rebuilding
certainly
that.
Men and women who are married and are raising their children can be a very powerful example.
Absolutely.
To the entire world. Well, Sarah Torre, we appreciate you joining us from the Heritage Foundation.
Thank you.
We hope you have a wonderful Christmas.
You too.
Up next, Pope Francis bids farewell to his dear friend and fellow priest, Cardinal Jorge Mejia. And the book of Exodus comes to the big screen, and Catholic film critic Steven Greydanus takes a look. Pope Francis greets Sister Cristina Scucci at this week's general audience in Rome. She was the winner of Italy's The Voice and gave Holy Father a copy of her first album. How beautiful. It's Thursday, December the 11th. Thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. The 72nd annual Golden Globe nominees are out tonight. Birdman leading the pack with 7 nominations. Boyhood and The Imitation Game follow with 5 nods each. Interesting, HBO and Showtime dominate the television nominations. This illustrates the strength of pay cable networks. That award show airs in January. Steven Greydanus, film critic for Decent Films Guide and the National Catholic Register, joining us by Skype. Steven, what would be your picks for the top films this year?
I'm still finalizing my top 10 list, but 2 that really stand out to me are 2 Days, One Night from the Dardenne brothers and an animated Belgian film called Ernest and Celestine.
Some that we probably haven't seen. We probably will see, though, the new epic, the biblical epic Exodus, Gods and Men. What do you think that the director Ridley Scott is trying to accomplish here?
Well, this is, as you know, the second major biblical epic this year from the Old Testament, following Noah by Darren Aronofsky, and where Darren Aronofsky was really trying to elaborate and even mythologize the biblical story. Ridley Scott wants to go in the opposite direction. His intention is to try to strip down and present a demythologized, almost naturalistic version of the story. So he's looking at the plagues and at the parting of the Red Sea, and he's looking for naturalistic rationales, not necessarily to take God out of the picture, because God is still very much a presence in the story, but to show God working through nature.
Well, these biblical epics are really spectacles. How does this do in that department, especially with the 3D thrown in?
You know, I think that 3D is rarely an asset in live action, and this is a case where I don't think it really matters. Ridley Scott, however, is one of the few directors in Hollywood who really excels at spectacle, and in particular at large-scale epic action sequences. So the movie opens with a big battle sequence between the Egyptians and the Hittites, and where most directors in Hollywood today would turn a scene like that into incomprehensible, impressionistic cuts. Scott really directs it in a way so that the action is very lucid and easy to follow. It's a pleasure to watch his action scenes.
All right, there's a great potential to reach a wide secular audience. Do you think this will be good for the original Bible story, or not so good based on how it's presented?
I would say it's a mixed bag. Some of the aspects of the way that the character of God comes across in the film, presented in the person of a messenger, an angel, who's played by an 11-year-old boy, are a little off-putting. That's going to be challenging both to believers and unbelievers. Another problematic theme in the film has to do with the kind of tension between Moses and the figure of God. It really almost goes in a kind of postmodern cafeteria Catholic sort of creative disagreement.
How do you think Christian Bale portrays the character of Moses?
Bale only has one setting, and that's intense. He's very intense, just as he is in the Batman series. So it's a very different take on Moses than we've seen before. Not my vision of Moses particularly, but not one that I object to either.
All right, we can find Steven Greydanus at decentfilms.com, and his critiques are also in the National Catholic Register. Steven, thanks so much for joining us on EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Brian.
And Pope Francis today said goodbye to his longtime friend, Cardinal Jorge Mejia, who served the Vatican for 40 years. The Holy Father attended the Mass for the Christian burial of the former head of the Vatican archives. He offered the final blessing. Like Pope Francis, Cardinal Mejia was born and raised in Buenos Aires. When he suffered a heart attack during the 2013 conclave, the newly elected Pope visited Cardinal Mejia in the hospital. In fact, the Cardinal received the anointment of the sick 3 different times from Pope Francis before his death this week. Cardinal Mejia was 91. May his soul and all the souls of the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. For all of us at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night, and may God bless you.